Good afternoon, everybody. My name's James Parks. I'm the Partnership Manager for the North Yorkshire Safeguarding Children Partnership, and I've got the pleasure of welcoming you here to our virtual mini masterclass. This is our second and final masterclass of this round. If you haven't done so already, if I could just ask you to put on your details into the chat box. And if you could just put your name and your organisation so that we know that you're with us today. So the aim of the session is has got three main aims really. It's one, to look at the current issues in safeguarding children, and these masterclasses are quite full with information that will provide hopefully you with some rich learning that you can take back to your colleagues. It's also looking at relevant changes in safeguarding practice and how we can make sure that we're understanding those changes and legislation changes, and how you can utilise some of the resources that we have pulled together on behalf of the partnership for yourselves. There are five elements to the sessions. There's myself and my colleagues Hayden and Emma, who are the two policy officers for the Safeguarding Partnership. And we also have Ali and Natalie, who are on hand to take any questions. So if you do have any questions throughout this afternoon's or across the next hour, I'd like you just to pop those in the chat feature, and after each session we'll pause and take any questions that you might have. Please feel free to use the chat as a way to communicate with us, and again, if you do have any questions, we'd love to hear those from yourselves. So without further ado, we'll make a start in terms of looking at a serious case review. So this is a serious case review that we have recently published. It relates to Clare. The serious case review has been published on our website, so hopefully some people will have received this information already, and you may well have spent some time looking through the serious case review in some detail, and looking at, from a point of view of your organisation, how you can make sure that you're disseminating that information out to your relevant teams. So I just really want to start with a bit of an overview of who Clare is and what Clare, how we came about providing the serious case review here in North Yorkshire. So Clare is a 7-year-old girl who has a number of social, emotional, mental health difficulties from a very young age. Clare herself was detained under the Mental Health Act, was accommodated or lived at the time of her death in a Tier 4 mental health hospital. Unfortunately, Clare took her own life whilst staying in the hospital, and this is where the serious case review kicked in as part of the death within service. So what I'd like to do is look at the detail really, and pull out some of the key learning from this particular case that you can take back to your organisations. I think it's fair to say within this particular case, and we've seen with other cases, Clare's hospital was in Norfolk, which for those that are aware is around 200 miles away from us here in North Yorkshire, which had a number of impacts on both Clare and her wider family in terms of that engagement and involvement in Clare's care. We've been very fortunate in a way that we have worked alongside Clare's family, had engagement with her mum and with her dad, who have been part of the review itself. So has been able to provide us with an oversight of what Clare is like, how she behaved, how she went about life, looking at some of the challenges that she might have faced herself. Claire's family describe her as a fun-loving, witty, caring, and a big-hearted individual who had a love for animals and for nature. And I think it's really important for us to look at, particularly with serious case reviews, what was life like for this child when she was growing up. Clare had lived within a separated family. So mum and dad had separated at an early age, and as a result of that and other matters, had really kind of taken a hit on her social, emotional, mental health. The highlights or the bullet points that I've identified, just to briefly share with you today, just pull out some of the key themes that we've highlighted within the report itself. So the importance of undertaking those holistic assessments of a child's health needs has been something that has been highlighted several times, and about the robust nature of information sharing between different agencies. And I think this is a common theme. I haven't read yet one serious case review that criticises people for too much information sharing. It's generally those where we see information sharing has got areas that we can improve on. So we need to make sure that when we're undertaking assessments of any kind, but particularly in this situation around those health assessments, we need to be making sure that we're doing them at the most the earliest opportunity, making sure that they are holistic in its nature and involves all the agencies who are around that child at that time, to make sure that all the information the professionals who are working with have those to hand. The second point really is, and if you from a school background or even a health professional yourself, is looking at communication. And communication is about those conversations. It's about sharing of detailed records and information, making sure that if a child moves from one setting, so one school to another, that the information and the educational background and files and of her emotional well-being in this particular case are transferred into the knowledge of the school that is taking a child. So we found, particularly with Clare, sort of that lack of communication between school 1 and school 2, and looking at those sort of child protection files, going with the child over to a new school, briefing obviously on relevant information that you feel is needed to share to protect and support that individual. We're also looking at the sort of CAMS services, and I appreciate and you'll be familiar with the demands that are on our child and adolescent mental health services at the moment, probably more than ever, in terms of the sort of knock-on effects that we might face with COVID, but also at the time of the serious case review. And this serious case review relates back to 2017, and when we've identified the review, we've seen a number of improvements within the last few years around a number of different areas, which has been reassuring. So the CAMS waiting lists, and we know that this is a national issue in terms of making sure that children get the right support at the right time by the right professionals. And I think CAMS isn't the be all and end all of mental health support. We've got a number of different organisations, and some are on the call today, from Compass, who provide mental health services. We've got online products such as Kooth and GoTo website that we can access services and information to help support children and young people's social, emotional, mental health, which I'll come on to in a little later. It's really important to capture the voice of a child and to listen to what the child and the parents are saying, and equally that information is taken seriously by professionals. Within this case, we saw the kind of key information really that was articulated by Clare herself, but also by her parents, that they felt at the time wasn't taken seriously by the professionals caring for Clare at the time. The unfortunate circumstances where Clare has unfortunately passed away, within the review, we've been able to work with partners to understand and with the family to look at what was life like for Clare. And that is really important when we're undertaking referrals to children's services, when we're undertaking assessments, is about how do we as organisations get the voice of the child in our assessments. We need to be talking to them, we need to be engaging with them, and looking for different ways to try and engage if they don't want to speak, looking at creative ways to try and get those views, wishes and feelings. So using things like signs of safety and a variety of other resources that we can embed sort of creative ways to get the voice of the child into those sort of assessments and make sure that they fully understand what support is on offer. And then the final really point was looking at the care provided by specialist mental health hospitals. So we know, particularly with this case, we have a child who is in the care of a Tier 4 mental health provision, who was supposed to be under sort of scrutiny or surveillance on a number of occasions, to find that actually those observations weren't undertaken in a timely way, which led to Clare, unfortunately, tying a ligature and killing herself. So it's that kind of ability to make sure that if we are housing or providing care to children and young people, that we're doing that to the best of our abilities. And beds are scarce within Tier 4 mental health hospitals. We know that is a national issue, and something that this review highlights as an area for improvement, which we are working with our colleagues in NHS England to try and identify alternatives. So I appreciate that's very a quick whistle-stop tour of the information. You can get the information in detail from the series case review and our executive summary. We've also got a dedicated masterclass looking at the learning from this on the 16th of November. It's an hour-and-a-half session, and you can book directly on using the link, and that is just put the link into the chat if it's something that you feel you would like to look at. So apologies, it's brief, but I just wanted to really bring it to your attention. As I say, with mental health is a real important issue at the moment, and something that I know has received a lot of interest, particularly around the support we're offering to children and young people during the pandemic. Here are just some resources. Again, I'll link to our website. Hopefully people will be familiar with organisations like I've mentioned, Couth and Compass, the GoTo website, which is a commissioned website from the NHS CCG's clinical commissioning groups, and the local authority, which provides a repository of resources that are at your fingertips, and also some guidance there and pathways if you're experiencing children who are self-harming or have got suicidal ideation. There's some pathways there that can take you through the steps and services that are available in North Yorkshire. I'm coming on to the next aspect, really, which again has come from reviews. It's been a resource that we have adapted and borrowed with pride from our colleagues in health in the Harrogate District Foundation Trust, who use this home environment assessment tool. I appreciate that not every practitioner on the call today will be going into family homes, so please bear with me. But if you are an organisation who do go into homes, it's a useful tool to sit down with the parents to go through, looking at how you can eliminate some of the potential risks in the house, understanding a bit of assessment of is the house safe? Have they got the right support? Have they got the right infrastructures in place? Have they got the knowledge to care for those children in a safe way? So we've seen, unfortunately, deaths of children in North Yorkshire in terms of safe sleeping. or unsafe sleeping arrangements. We've seen children who have unfortunately been tangled up in blind cords and has caused death through that. So it's just a way of highlighting some of those particular risks to those individuals. Again, it's a resource that is available for anyone to use on our website, and we will share with you the slide sets with all these links so that you can disseminate those back to your colleagues. I suppose moving from COVID, but equally it has an impact in terms of the deaths we've seen, not particularly with children and young people, but those of in the adult population, and then just generally sort of bereavement support that we've seen kind of within our working lives. It's a one-stop shop, really. We've tried to put in information there around children and families bereavement support services in North Yorkshire, and is a resource again that has national information. It's got some resources that you can use with children and young people. So you may have children who are in your care who have lost a relative or a loved one or a friend and need some additional support. So hopefully you'll find that a useful page on our website. And I just really want to highlight some other training that is taking place. The Click Path to Protection, we've joined forces with an organisation called the Marie Collins Foundation, who are based just outside Massam here in North Yorkshire, but have an international reach. They specialise in online abuse and exploitation, and they provided some, or are providing us with some free training aimed at frontline professionals around how to deal with children and young people who have experienced with online abuse or online exploitation. There's 3 levels to it. The Think, which is for sort of every practitioner to do. There's the Act, which is again is that sort of next level up, looking at those particularly who are in a case in a role that you'll be working with children and young people, sort of case holding, and how you act and how you support those individuals. And then there's the Manage Path to Protection, which again is aimed at managers of those that are managing staff who are case hold supervisors or practice kind of managers. The training is free. The links are on the website. If anyone is interested, I know the places are getting booked up quite quickly, but there are some spaces still left on the twilight sessions that we have put in to try and accommodate for those that may be in school who can't easily access the training. So I'll come to Nat, and that concludes my session, just to see if there's any questions in the chat bar, Natalie.
No, nothing in the chat bar, James. Just I think Val did ask about which you've covered, about us sharing the slides, which we will be with everybody after the session, and I'll continue to put the links in the side if that helps. But obviously, any questions as we go through, please feel free to bob those in there.
That's great, thank you. So I'd like to now welcome Emma Phillips, who's going to take you through the next set of slides.
Good afternoon, thank you very much. As I say, James mentioned, my name's Emma Phillips, so I work as one of the policy officers within the partnership, but I'm also the lead for our multi-agency child exploitation and contextual safeguarding arrangements, and chair all the level 2 and 7 district multi-agency meetings for child exploitation that we hold. Really mindful from those of you that I can see have put your details in the chat bar, that some of you I know quite well, some of you attend some of those locality district meetings, some of you I don't know so well, so probably don't know quite as much around our MACE arrangement. So I'll give you a little bit of a flavour of that before I give you a bit of an overview of where we are currently with it. Mindful, those of you that do know me know I am rather renowned for talking quite fast. The more excited I get, the faster I talk. So I have put my email address at the end for anyone who wants to ask any questions. Please do pop any questions in the chat if there's anything you want to ask, and I've got a gap at the end to be able to answer those for you. So in terms of our multi-agency child exploitation arrangements, that's largely an umbrella term for a number of different vulnerabilities. So it encompasses child sexual exploitation, it encompasses child criminal exploitation, including county lines, which no doubt many of you will see regularly in the media at the moment, children who are reported missing from home, modern slavery and human trafficking, as well as harmful sexual behaviour and online child exploitation. In terms of how we identify that, our MACE process is split up into 2 sections. So we have MACE level 1 that incorporates our children and young people in terms of risk identification, risk management, and risk assessment in terms of their risk of exploitation. And then our level 2 process that looks at our contextual safeguarding within our communities and within our districts. So that's really looking at our offenders that we know about and that we're worried about present a risk of exploitation to young people. It looks at our locations, our themes, and what we think is going on, and then how we can, as a multi-agency partnership, come together to look to disrupt that and safeguard the children that we are concerned about. So in terms of how those processes go together, initially we would receive a safeguarding referral, as you would for any other child that you had a worry about. That would come into our multi-agency screening team, that's made up of North Yorkshire Police, our health colleagues from Harrogate District Foundation Trust, our early help and our children's social care managers who would look at that referral. Predominantly, they will make an assessment at that stage then to think if there is a risk of exploitation, and they would inevitably allocate that to either social care or to early help to start to understand and unpick that. Now, as part of that work that social workers or early help workers would do was to go out to speak to families to look at what that exploitation risk looks like. And that's just a copy of our risk assessment tool that we use for child exploitation. So they would talk to the family, they would talk to the child themselves, they may come out to wider partners from school, any other agencies that are working with that young person, to really identify and understand what that holistic picture is for that child or young person and the risk that they may be experiencing. As part of that discussion, they'll decide on the risk level for that child. So that might be that actually we don't think that child's at risk, or we think actually it's low, medium or high. So that's a multi-agency decision. And that risk is continually reviewed through that process. Now, within that, there is inevitably contextual safeguarding concerns. Children don't just live in isolation. They live in our communities. They attend our schools. There is a lot going on, that extra familial risk, and that's what we're particularly focused on. So we're looking at that interlink between children and young people themselves, their peer groups, their networks, where they go, what they're part of, locations we might be worried about, be that parks, bus stations, particular hotspots, locations, both online and offline. Adults around those young people that might pose a risk of harm, and what some of the themes are around that. So, for example, at the moment, something that's really prevalent for us is the nature of drugs that young people might be exposed to and what they might be taking. So we come together as a partnership group to share that. So looking at a year in review then, so we made quite significant changes to our multi-agency child exploitation arrangements, and we're really just looking at what's really gone well and what we need to continue to evolve and what we need to develop. In line with COVID, as of March, we moved all our multi-agency meetings across the 7 districts to a virtual platform. We previously used Skype, and we're now just migrated onto Teams. Actually, we found attendance through those meetings really good, partly due to the really strong relationships we probably built up prior to COVID lockdown and the relationships between partners. But actually, virtual delivery has gone quite well, and I'm going to touch on some of our learning from COVID in a minute. We've just completed our MACE evaluation, so we've gone out to partners to ask a series of questions around how they feel MACE is going and the impact and how we know we're being effective in terms of safeguarding children. Really overwhelmingly positive feedback. Partners spent a lot of time giving us really detailed feedback, and 97% of respondents felt that MACE was effective or extremely effective, which is really positive. Again, for me, it's about strong partnerships. It's not just about us sharing information between, one partner and another. That's a start, but actually it's about collaborative outcomes. It's about us working together collaboratively, coming together. We've all got different pieces of a jigsaw. We all have different skill base, different opportunities that we can come together to try and put in problem solving plans, to look at disruption, to look at different engagement opportunities. And I can really see that's really taken a hold across North Yorkshire over the last year, and it's really positive. We have developed a number of new partnerships as part of this process. We now regularly are having in a number of areas sort of 20 to 25 partners attending these meetings, which is really fantastic. We've made a number of new partnerships with education, and if there's anyone on this webinar who is from secondary education or from higher education and actually aren't part of their MACE locality district meeting, then please do take a note of my email address. I'd be really interested. I'm really keen that we get more schools on board board, the information you guys hold, the soft intelligence you hold, the way you can contribute to the work we do is absolutely fundamental, and we're really keen that we develop that across our partners. The schools that we currently have who take part in our MACE arrangements are really, really good. Their information is really helpful. We've developed partnerships with young carers, those who work with young carers, also with our probation colleagues. Again, when you think about a lot of the people we're often worried about in terms of risk of exploitation, a number of them have been at risk of exploitation themselves when they were children. They've now transitioned in that crucial transitional safeguarding period, and now they're adults, and actually the behaviours are still causing us concern. So probation are really key for us in some of that work that we can try and do, because inevitably they have a number of needs and vulnerabilities in their own right. We have a number of housing providers, again, looking at what legislation housing can do. Their engagement, their interaction with a number of young people and adults, again, is really, really key. We also have a new perpetrator process, or persons that pose a risk. We have now police leads in each of the 7 district areas for MACE, which enables us, where we do identify a person of concern, enables us to really put together a problem-solving plan around them. And in effect, if you deal with some of their needs and their behaviours, actually you are ultimately creating safety for a number of young people who may be being exploited by or influenced by that individual within the district area. We also have developed a number of knowledge hub resources, and I'm going to come to that in a minute to give you a flavour of how you can access those and what's available for you. In terms of areas of development, we are continually learning and evolving. We are looking at how we can integrate some of our more organised crime into our MACE Level 2 process. A lot of our county lines, a lot of our criminal exploitation and some of our sexual exploitation is largely part of much bigger organised criminal networks. So we are looking at opportunities to develop that work. We are looking to develop our cross-border work. We've done a lot of work, especially on our North Yorkshire, West Yorkshire border. We border a number of larger metropolitan forces, and really looking at what does that look like, because organised crime gangs will adapt their business model. They move children about. They don't really care that actually North Yorkshire only covers North Yorkshire, City of York covers something else. We need to learn to be able to share that information to be able to keep up with this. Again, I've mentioned around increase of schools and college attendances. I am going to put together a virtual pack for schools in terms of MACE attendance, and I know that James has recently given some presentations at some of the virtual heads and DSL meetings that you've had to try and encourage partners to come along. We are inevitably working in a very fast-paced, changing threat posed by organised crime groups and county lines, and I think the more that we can become upskilled in terms of understanding what that threat looks like and what that threat poses to our communities, the better we're going to be in terms of our eyes and ears on the ground, and how well we can recognise it and get in there early. We are looking at our national referral mechanism process. For those partners not aware, the national referral mechanism is whereby we have a duty to refer a child or young person that we think might be subject to human traffic or modern slavery to the single competent authority, which at the moment is the Home Office, in terms of we're worried that they're at risk of serious vulnerability. We know we've done a lot of work in terms of awareness raising about that, but inevitably we have quite a lot still to do on that. So we are looking at that, and there is a working group developing that across county. We're looking at wider partnership contextual safeguarding training. So I currently am chairing a task and finish group as part of our Serious Organised Crime Partnership Board, work to look at our wider partners. So those people who still have safeguarding as part of their role, but perhaps not their preliminary role, those wider people that are in our communities, how well are they aware of cookery, and how well are they aware of county lines? Do they know what to do if they see things within their community? And really publishing and promoting the partnership information sharing form. We've also launched, or about to launch, our MACE and Contextual Safeguarding Strategy that really sets out what we intend to do over the next 3 years. And hopefully that launch, you should see that come January, in terms of what we plan to do and how we plan to put some of these ideas and visions into practice. Just some learning from COVID. I know we're talking about COVID an awful lot at the moment, but there was some really interesting learning I think we found as a partnership around our delivery virtually for MACE, which I think is probably been quite helpful. Partners have fed back there's significantly less travel time for partners, which is really helpful. We've had a lot more engagement, much easier to manage time. I haven't seen any distinct differences in terms of the effective and succinct information sharing. I think that's been really positive. Major plus in terms of lifetime access to systems. So police, for example, who would often struggle to be able to connect the Wi-Fi in the buildings we're in, are able to check niche to search for offenders, to search for dates of birth, addresses, really has sped up what we're able to achieve within the 2-hour slot that we have with partners. Much more consistent representation from key partners as well, and that's really important when you think about how we build trust and build relationships across our partnerships, and that's certainly something we would want to continue, albeit recognition that face-to-face is still really beneficial in terms of building some of that. So if we ever get out of this world where we are constantly online, probably look at 1 a quarter in terms of face-to-face delivery. Mapping meetings don't work as well online in terms of that finding. So mapping meetings inevitably are where we sit down often with a flip chart or whiteboard, and we're sat drawing out the physical links between children and people, between adults, vehicles, locations. That tends to work better face to face. So we need to think about how we can either deliver that virtually in a much more interactive way, or inevitably think about how we can do that while still keeping that safety element. Movement to Teams has been really quite positive. It's nice as a chair to be able to see people, again, as opposed to teleconference. We have a secure web server, which enables partners to access agendas and minutes again, which is really helpful because they can view them live time. They can look at what we might have talked about a couple of months ago. But we need to continually revisit that and look at making the best use of partners' time so that partners do feel comfortable to share and to challenge one another. If any of you on this call, I know a number of you are already involved in either our MACE Level 1 or MACE Level 2 process. If any of you would like to come and observe a meeting, if you can email me and let me know, and I'm more than happy that you log in just so you can get a feel for what this looks like and how perhaps from your agency you might be able to contribute. We also have a number of 1-minute guides, practice guidance. They're all on our website, which again help in terms of understanding how everything fits together. Okay, I want to talk to you next a little bit around our Be Aware Knowledge Hub. So I'm really excited with this. It's a really exciting development. It's been about a year in the planning and in the making. It became quite apparent that actually there is so much information, so many resources around the MACE agenda, so around exploitation, around modern slavery, human trafficking. Actually, it can feel a little bit overwhelming, certainly for wider partners in terms of where to go to, what to look for resources. So we wanted to bring it together in a way that made it really easy and accessible for you guys to be able to pick stuff up, to use videos that we think are really useful so that you can use them with children and young people, use them with parents, use them to train within your teams. So we've set up a distinct element on our website across 3 phases. So we've done phase 1, which is the element for professionals. We are then looking to move into phase 2, that we're going to look at resources for parents, and then phase 3, we're going to look at some co-design for resources for children and young people. In terms of where to find it, this is the front page of our website. It's just in this blue banner at the top, which comes up on the front page. And training that we had before has now been popped under the tab for professionals. But you can now go on and click on Be Aware, and it brings you to this front screen. Sorry if it's a little bit blurry for you, but there's the 6 vulnerabilities. These are all hyperlinked on here. If you click into one of those, it then takes you to a series of resources. So, for example, this is the child criminal exploitation one. So it talks to you about what child criminal exploitation is. It talks to, there's some interactive doodly videos, animated videos about, for example, what cuckooing is, what being in a gang means. There's some really good videos. There's one made by some of our colleagues in the Harrogate and Ripon area around what county lines looks like in a rural community. Again, really good resources for you to be able to use. It identifies some of the signs you might want to look for children and young people, and where to go for sort of further information and support. And we have signposted some of the really good national resources that are on there. So I would invite you, if possible, please, to share that with your teams, to go out and make sure you put that in your team meetings. Go use the website. If there's anything when you're looking, you think, oh, I'd really would like that, I'd really like to see some resources on that, please email me. We are continually reviewing it, and we will be adding to the website all the time, so please let us know. Okay, mindful of time, I'm 3 minutes over. So I also need to talk to you a little bit around our multi-agency audit findings. Now, we have so far done 2 over this period, and I'm going to talk to you about both of them. So first and foremost, we conducted an audit into harmful sexual behaviour. This was a deep dive of 4 cases that were recently opened or currently open to children and families across a wide range. So we looked at a child or young person who was on a child protection plan, a child that was managed through Child in Need, a child that was managed through our early help processes, and then a young person who had been a looked after child, and interesting actually was an adult at the point that we conducted the audit, but really key for us in terms of learning around some of those transitional safeguarding challenges, which I know are very prevalent in terms of sort of national and local interest at the moment about how effectively manage that transition from childhood into adulthood. So in summary then, good practice, we found overall harmful sexual behaviour was well recognised by agencies. They submitted referrals in good time. We saw good practice where there was early consultation with Youth Justice Service, often at the point we're having strategy meetings. That was seen to be really good across a number of cases. We saw some really good practice in terms of practitioners having really skilled, difficult conversations with children about the risk they pose. So it's a difficult balance in terms of the harm that child or young person may have inflicted, but also the harm they may continue to potentially be at risk of. And it can be difficult to look at that and manage the child's welfare needs that may arise out of sort of the prolonged investigation or not being able to see family members, peers, etc. And we saw some really good use of good work with young people on that. We saw good use of the police under 10 protocol. So this under 10 protocol is where we have children and young people who are involved in an investigation under the age of 10, and enables the police to have early liaison with the Crown Prosecution Service to fast track any forensic downloads. So for example, mobile phone downloads or emails or computer downloads, which inevitably become part of harmful sexual behaviour cases. It also enables cases to be reviewed by a sexually offence trained prosecutor within the Crown Prosecution Service, which hopefully aims to complete the investigation within an 8-week period, which really reduces that impact on the child and on their family. We saw good use of referral to our colleagues in forensic CAMS in terms of advice for complex needs. We saw good referral to our child sexual assault assessment centre. Again, that was really interesting because we saw referrals for children and young people who've been victim to sexual offences, but actually what we also identified was that they can take referrals for those young people who we believe may have perpetrated that sexual harm, because inevitably what we did find is that they often have experienced early sexual trauma themselves, and actually there's a need for us to look at their holistic health needs for that child and young person. We also saw good use of the AIM2 assessment. So the AIM2 assessment stands for Assessment, Implementation and Moving On Framework. And it looks at sort of that initial assessment and designed to identify further work, as well as sort of identifying the risk and protective factors. For North Yorkshire, it could be completed often by Youth Justice or with some specially trained children's social care representatives. And has to take place once we've got a conviction of a sexual offence or caution for a sexual offence for a young person. We saw good information sharing across the partnership. So, for example, in one case, information around a young person's bail conditions was shared with the GP practice, which was really good. It enabled that GP practice to put measures in place so that child or young person who had regular medical needs to go to the GP practice could be slightly away from sort of the general waiting area. So actually they could safely adhere to their bail conditions without the need for them not to be able to attend their medical appointments. As within any audit, there were some needs in terms of further development. It was really important, and where we saw the best cases, it's where we'd seen that holistic overview for that child. What was really quite apparent was that many of the young people that we were looking at for harmful sexual behaviour had experienced early sexual trauma themselves. Many had numerous adverse childhood experiences, and what there was real strength in understanding what that whole picture was for that child and how that early trauma had impacted on current behaviour. I think another element that we found was really something we want to develop is also experience at getting that early trauma care, early therapeutic support upon sexual trauma and sexual victimisation, and not enabling those that trauma to develop over time to when we get to the point where we're actually dealing with the harmful sexual behaviour. We did see issues in terms of prolonged investigations, and you could really see the significant social isolation that impacted on for the child, where they weren't able to sort of see peers, they weren't able to see family members, and that inevitably can increase the risk of harmful sexual behaviour for that young person, not only within the community but also online. We did see some evidence of this impasse around what interventions that can take place while investigations are ongoing. We know we can use the AIM2 assessment, but we've got to wait till the outcome of investigations. And we did see there was some evidence of tensions being created between agencies and ultimately resulting in delays for that child or young person. We did see some evidence of disguised compliance. I think that's come through on a number of audits. Again, that's largely influenced by sort of previous victimisation, often intergenerational sexual abuse within families, fear, shame, lack of recognition. Really key that we understand that and we continue as professionals to understand that and to challenge where appropriately on that. Last but not least, there was some evidence for some of our really highly complex cases where we almost had multiple case management systems. So we might have a young person who was sort of managed by MAPA, also managed through our No Wrong Door Raised process. They might have come into MACE for certain exploitative elements of their behaviour. They might also have looked after reviews. And in some cases, you could see that actually there was really good work by professionals, but kind of responding to the daily crisis. And sometimes there was a slight overshadowing around the plan to manage the harmful sexual behaviour. In terms of what's happened since, the findings of the audit have been shared with the Learning and Improvement subgroup, and a lot of the actions that have come from that have now been adopted onto the overarching work plan. The use of the Under 10 protocol has been promoted through organisational learning by North Yorkshire Police. We will be updating our HSB practice guidance and developing a 1-minute guide around sort of AIM2 assessments and what that looks like. We've had a review undertaken around the multiple case management systems just to make sure that we are aligning our processes as closely as possible so you haven't got that slight silo working. We've also got a 7-point briefing which is on our website, which you can view at your leisure if you want to learn a little bit more about what we found on that audit. Okay, we've also done a missing from home and care. Interestingly for us as a partnership, this happened during lockdown. So this is the first one that we've done virtually, which has been really interesting for us actually in terms of how we've done that. Again, we looked deep dive of 4 cases, again, spread across looked after children, a child on child protection, child in need, and an early help case. What we found, quality and recognising missing from home at the point of notification being made was strong. There was a good response from North Yorkshire Police. They have to, when they often the first people to get the missing from home notification, have to go through a set of questioning which they call Thrive, which is really assessing the threat, harm and risk to that child or young person. There was, for example, a case where a child had gone missing whilst at school. The staff responded really promptly in notifying North Yorkshire Police, but also identified to them the vulnerabilities of that child or young person. That child had a really significant medical condition, which meant the fact they were missing more serious than necessarily just reporting that child as being truant or not attending from school. And actually what we saw was, because of that key bit of information being shared by school, it meant the police response was much more appropriate to the risk level than just a young person not turning up for school. We saw really strong wider intervention carried out by the Community Safety Hub in 2 of the cases. So, for example, where we had known locations where children were congregating, we could see work that was done by adding lighting, clearing pathways, cutting down greenery to make areas more visible. We saw a number of recent developments now in terms of quality of working and information sharing between local areas for some of our out of authority looked after children. Some of these processes were introduced after the time period of the missing episodes, and I'm going to come to what we plan on doing, because a number of changes have taken place that we've already put in place after some of these cases were audited. Children who are high risk or repeatedly go missing from home are now discussed as part of a newly established process between North Yorkshire Police and children and families. We have specialist social workers now who are meeting with specialist missing from home police officers. This enables additional risks to be shared with the police, so we can put plans in place so if they're reported to the control room, we've got plans to facilitate better information sharing around that initial response to future missings. Again, that process came in place after this audit, but we've seen some really good practice of that already. There was evidence throughout the cohort of cases around the return from home interviews being shared within the multi-agency MACE level 2 meetings that I chair. Again, that gives us opportunity to consider some of the locations that children and people have been to while they've been missing, look at commonalities and themes around that, and look at the associations of who children might have been with while they've been missing, so we can look at it through the lens of a contextual safeguarding approach. In terms of wider areas for development, the 0 to 19 Healthy Child Service weren't always notified of a missing episode for a child that they'd had contact with. And in one case, I think it had been shared in MACE, that information hadn't necessarily filtered through to that child's health record. And there was evidence to suggest there was some unmet health needs for that child, which that might have given that opportunity to pick that up. The management return wasn't always submitted by North Yorkshire Police to children and families, and some of them only had limited background information. So it meant then when the worker is going out to do that return from home interview, they've got very sketchy, limited details in terms of what's gone on. In relation to the out of authority looked after case in this sample, there were gaps which required specific attention. We have now looked at our out of authority processes for North Yorkshire, and they have been strengthened since that missing episode has taken place. Return interviews presented within this sample were limited sometimes in exploring the risk of child exploitation, especially in one case where there was evidence that a child had pre-planned to go missing. And there was more that we could be doing in terms of identifying and doing that child exploitation risk assessment after that missing episode, so we can really understand what that looks like for that child or young person. What's happened since? North Yorkshire Police have had a review of their missing from home process since this, and now all children under 18 who have a missing episode are automatically graded as medium risk. So depending on the risk level someone's reported as from a police perspective depends on the nature of the response. I think we had the odd case that was recorded as no apparent risk, and that's now been removed because inevitably if a child is missing, they're never going to be no apparent risk. We now have a joint protocol for children who go missing from home, and that's been updated and it will be published imminently, and that's combined with York as well as North Yorkshire. We've shared the learning with the Learning and Improvement subgroup. Again, these actions from this audit will inform that work plan. Feedback's been given to partners in terms of some good practice areas that we had, and we are developing a 7-point briefing to disseminate the key learning. I mentioned just in terms of the developments, a number of the developments that we've already recognised, already put in place, had taken place after this audit. So just to assure ourselves in terms of are we actually making an impact, have these new protocols actually seen a change and an improvement for children and young people, we are continuing to pick up 2 more cases that we will do a deep dive audit of towards the end of this month and the beginning of next month. We'll then feed back on not just these cases in terms of formal reporting, but actually how effective have those changes been? Can we see that we've made a difference? Okay, any questions? I'm mindful I do talk quite fast and that was quite a lot of information. I'm sure you're probably sick of hearing my voice now. Please do pop some questions in the chat box. If you want to email me at the end, my email address is there for you, or if there's something you think about later. We will also be on the end of this call if there's anything that you want to pick up with any of us. But if there is nothing further, I will hand over to Hayden.
Nope, I think everything's okay. Hello everyone, I'm Hayden Rees-Jones. I'm the Policy and Development Officer for the partnership, and I'm here to talk to you about some of the campaigns and just a roundup of what resources that we actually have for a partnership. So one of the key sort of campaigns that we've run in the last few months is about the partnership information sharing form, and basically this campaign ran in July to raise awareness about the partnership information sharing form and the 1-minute guide that accompanies this. This form is basically used where you have a concern about a child or a young person and you also want to raise that with the police as well as the local authority. Sometimes if you make a referral into the MAST, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will get diverted to the police for recording as part of their intelligence system where they can actually link it in with other information. So this is sort of like an important form for you to complete. If you are completing a referral to the local authority, you should also consider whether or not you need a partnership information sharing form to be completed as well. And also if you have something that doesn't quite meet the threshold but you still have concerns, you can also share information this way. There's been various different tweets, etc., that we've put out. As you can see, these are 3 of the graphics that we have actually used in order to support that campaign. Another campaign that we've ran as well and we continue to run is about hidden harm. Obviously, with the coronavirus outbreak, has only really increased children's vulnerability to hidden harm. Just because a child is at home does not mean that they're in a safe place, that they're not away from any sort of risk of abuse or neglect. And children might have often found themselves in harmful situations which have just been compounded by lockdown. Obviously, the pressures of people losing their jobs or being furloughed, or just the general mental health and unsureness of where we are at the moment has had a toll on everybody, children, young people and adults alike. The lockdown just has increased the risk of harm and hidden harm happening, because obviously children and young people have not been visible to services as much, like schools, etc. However, during this new lockdown which we entered yesterday, then the rules are slightly changed, because children and people are still going to school, but it still doesn't mean that children are not at risk of hidden harm. So what this campaign does is to seek awareness of the signs and symptoms of hidden harm. Possible indicators which you might have might be late arriving at school, or unexplained absence, about maybe an unkept appearance, maybe they're hungry, always tired, etc. You could have behavioural issues such as being withdrawn, being aggressive or argumentative, suddenly being disrespectful where they weren't like that before, overly compliant, or excessively vigilant. It's basically looking out for big changes in children. Could be mental health related, such as they're feeling very anxious, or angry, fearful of being embarrassed, or feelings of failure, low self-esteem, maybe avoidance of certain issues, that sort of thing. So it's really about professionals knowing what signs to look out for, what signs might be of a concern, and what they should do as a result of those. So for more information, the address is there on the website, the Hidden Harm campaign, which is also on the same page, is also the information about the partnership information sharing form as well. We did do an additional session for sessions for schools, which went to the DSLs and head teachers primarily, and that is also available on the CYPS website, as the information is available from there as well, so you can access a lot more guidance, etc., if you're a school. Another issue which obviously is here in terms of private fostering. We know nationally that private fostering arrangements are very rarely reported, and we suspect to be underreported. Just so that you know, a private fostering arrangement is when someone other than a parent or a close relative cares for a child for a period of 28 days or more in agreement with the child's parents. It doesn't apply if the child is over 16 years of age, or if they're it applies up to 18 if the child is disabled. And basically, parents are under a legal duty to report these arrangements, but often either don't realise or fail to notify the local authority that these are happening. They should actually happen 6 weeks beforehand, so that appropriate assessments of the placement can actually be made. But because of the nature of these can be because of a result of a crisis within the family, maybe an immediate argument, and a next door neighbour or a close family friend has said that they would look after the child, just to give a little bit of distance and hopefully bring the family back together in the longer run. There are also things such as a step parent who is not married to the child's mother or father is not considered to be a close relative, and therefore, if, for example, we might have a nurse or a doctor who is self-isolating from their actual family because they're dealing with COVID cases, and the child is being looked after by the unmarried partner to that doctor or nurse, that would be a private fostering arrangement because they're not married. If they were married, then it wouldn't be a private fostering arrangement. We have you have to know that there is a requirement on professionals to notify the local authority if you believe an arrangement is in place and hasn't been notified. And in order to really help all professionals, what we have is a 1-minute guide, a video and practice guidance in relation to private fostering. All of those are available on our website under the professionals section. The video is only a few minutes long, but it's enough to brief staff if you say wanted to circulate that or play it through a team meeting, something like that, to really just get the information out there so that they can be aware of reporting those. So we have a dedicated page on our website, and I know that Nat's just actually posted that on there as well. The next thing I wanted to talk to you as well was about the school safeguarding audit. Every 2 years, the NYSCP undertakes an audit of the safeguarding arrangements within schools, basically to provide partners at adequate control, or to provide the board with a reassurance that adequate controls are in place in order to safeguard children and young people. We recognise the fact that there is a whole plethora of requirements that are placed on schools, and these are very long and very complex. The audit tool has basically been designed to make a useful reference to points for schools to identify strengths and weaknesses in the local arrangements, and to identify what actions that need to be taken in order to improve the service. The tool itself this year has had a very big refresh. We've tried to strip out as much of the repetition which people had identified was in there as previously, and also make it a little bit more user friendly. We've converted it from a Word document. It's now available and would be completed in Excel rather than in Word, and the updated tool reflecting all of the latest policy and procedure changes as a result of keeping children safe in education, and any other changes are all in there as well, and that's going to be issued to schools in the next week. And basically what we're looking at is for a return by the 31st of March 2021. In order to submit that, it should have also have gone through the whole school's appropriate governance arrangements, whether that's an independent school, a multi-academy trust, a free school, a private school, or a maintained school. It should be approved by your governors, your trustees, whoever, your proprietor, whoever is the most appropriate person for your school, and is part of that designated list of responsibilities. And what we will do after that is we will combine and share the information, look for themes where we can provide the partnership with reassurance that everything to safeguard children that can be done is being done, and also to identify what we can do in order to assist and facilitate that within schools better. The plan is that it should really be utilised with your school advisors and to inform your governing body, and it should feed into your school plan as well in terms of any actions that you need to take. As I said before, the tool is in Excel format. That will be emailed to all schools together with guidance on how to complete. When it is complete, we need that back in Excel format. It's been done in Excel for a specific reason, for data capture. In terms of other resources, the Safeguarding Children Board has the website safeguardingchildren.co.uk. On there you'll be able to find lots of procedures, practice guidance, 1-minute guides, videos, access to our training. There's a whole host of information on there. With the new Be Aware section is on there as well. We really do encourage everybody to go for that. If you go onto the website and you notice that actually training seems to have moved, then the Be Aware element is where training was. If you're looking for training for professionals, now it's within professionals, because we only really provide training to professionals anyway, so we've just moved that to there if you're looking for that. We also advise any professionals to follow our website, our Twitter feed as well, where whenever there's any new developments, we will actually put that on the website. We're constantly tweeting, and whenever there's a new 1-minute guide, practice guidance, etc., that will be put out there. On the website as well, there is our scrutiny is annual report as well, where you'll be able to read about the partnership and a review of the partnership up until March 2020. I said before about the procedures, practice guidance, etc. That's the link for you to be able to get to all of that sort of information from there. And as I said before, our training offer is there. That training offer includes online learning and links to other partners who offer training as well, whether or not that be free or paid for. You can also sign up to our e-bulletin, which is it's sort of like sent out monthly for you to be able to get information. Any new information that we have, we will send that out through there, any new policies and procedures, etc. So if you don't use Twitter, you'll be able to get the information this way, but obviously it's a slightly slow process because that doesn't come out as regular. All of our email addresses are on this slide. You'll be able to see that later on in the video if you want to contact any of us. And if you've got any questions at all, you can also email the partnership email address as below.
Thank you very much, Hayden. So that brings us to 1 o'clock, so concludes our 1 hour mini briefing. We'd love to get some instant feedback from yourselves. If you could provide that in the chat feature, just how you felt the content, the time of the session, the length of the session, that'd be really helpful.